Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. All right, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. Glad you're tuning into this episode. And today I have Robb Ryerse on the podcast. Robb, thank you for joining us at Spirituality Adventures.
Thanks, Fred.
Robb is a former pastor. We actually met through Doug Paget and the work that Robb does with Vote Common Good. And met maybe 2 years ago, something like that. And
yeah, I think we met at Mountain Film.
Oh, was it last year at Mountain?
Yeah, last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you going again this year?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, my wife started a master's program, and that is really taking up all of our extra time.
I'm planning on being there again. So this will be my third year for Mountain Film in Telluride, Colorado. So yeah, we were tromping around Telluride a little bit together last year. It was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So tell us where you were born, where you grew up.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit about your faith background and pastoral career, and then how you landed in the current work that you're doing.
Yeah. So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and then moved to upstate New York for my junior high and high school years. I am a third generation Baptist pastor. My grandfather helped to found a denomination called the General Association of Regular Baptists. And I like to tell people now that, the denomination I grew up in, this Baptist denomination, we weren't allowed to have anything to do with Southern Baptists because they were too liberal.
Wow.
Just to kind of put it on the spectrum, fundamentalist Baptist denomination up north. Went to Bible college, seminary, ended up pastoring. The first church I pastored was on Staten Island in New York City.
Seminary, by the way.
I went to Biblical Seminary. It's now called Mizio Seminary in Philadelphia.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I got
affiliated with anybody, or?
No, it was a offshoot from Westminster. And there were a couple of professors there that I loved, John Franke, and a guy named Bob Newman, and I wanted to study under them, and it was a perfect fit for me.
Okay.
So I pastored this small little church in New York City for 3 years, then spent a couple of years in it.
Was it a Baptist church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then spent a couple of years outside of Boston as a youth and outreach pastor at a church, and then 5 years in Central Michigan, pastoring a church. And I hit my 30th birthday, and I kind of turned. I woke up and was like, I can't imagine spending the rest of my life arguing about the stuff we're arguing about, having the conversations we're having. I was preparing to preach through the book of Genesis, and I realized that if I even gave voice to the questions I had, it would have gotten me fired from the church. let alone, offering any alternative answers. Like things like, hey, doesn't it sound like the voice in Genesis 1 and the voice in Genesis 2 are two different voices? um, why does it seem like Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are describing two different events? Um, questions like this. If I had even asked those questions, it would have gotten me fired. And so, started kind of wrestling with those kinds of things, wrestling with the question of hell. I remember riding with a pastor friend of mine in the car one day, and I said to him, I was like, wouldn't it be just like God to like let everybody in the end? And he just like, oh, kind of freaked out. And so I was having all of these questions. It was just like I woke up one day and the all the answers I had been given just stopped making sense.
Mm.
And so I had to fake it on Sunday mornings, and could not give voice at all to what I was struggling with, what I was thinking about. And that led to a pretty deep depression, spiritual depression, emotional depression, that in inauthenticity. And ultimately, it led my wife and I to making the decision that we were going to move halfway across the country, say goodbye to, the network we had had and, everything we had ever known, and start a completely new kind of church. Back in those days, the word deconstruction wasn't a thing, but that was what we had gone through. Um, we, the church we identified as an emergent church, at the time, which, is no longer really a thing. We ended up calling ourselves a progressive evangelical church. Um, so we founded this little church in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Um, Pastored it for 15 years, um, bivocationally. When you lose your network and everything else, and you're kind of starting over, and you got to pay the bills, you end up working a day job too, and so I've done that, ever since. Pastored the church for 15 years, got the church through COVID, and then it was like, we were just ready to take a break and to be done. So we, kind of quote unquote retired from pastoral ministry. And on Christmas Eve of this last year, um, we gathered the church back together. It had gone on for about a year and then kind of disbanded. Um, and we kind of had this realization that our life wasn't better without it. And so we are now in, like, spirit of resurrection, um kind of toying with bringing it back.
Hmm.
And we had a Christmas Eve service, we had a service in January, we had a service in March, we've got an Easter service planned,
Hmm.
and then we might go once a month, I think, is the plan. So I don't, who knows what the future holds. But yeah, that's a bit of my story, from like fundamentalist to, you know, super progressive, and kind of decon even went through the kind of the progressive Christian thing into like a full deconstruction. And yeah, I've been through that complete. When you say spiritual adventure, I feel like I've been on it all. And I'll tell you the analogy. The thing that comes to mind for me when I think about my own spiritual journey, it reminds me of the Sesame Street book I had when I was a kid. It was called Grover and the Museum of Everything in the World. I don't know if you remember this book, but
I
I had
don't.
this as a kid. You remember Grover, the little blue, Muppet on
Yeah.
Sesame Street. So Grover goes into this museum one day, and it's the museum of everything in the world. And And I mean, he goes through this museum and he sees everything in the world. There's clothes, there's food, there's just everything. And he gets to the end of the museum and he's kind of a little depressed because he's seen everything in the world. And then he realizes that he sees the sign that says the Museum of Everything Else in the World. And he opens the door and it's the door out of the museum, out into the world. And I feel like most of my life I was in the museum of everything in, church or God. And I felt like I got to the end of that. And then gloriously the door opened and I realized that there's so much more out there. And that's kind of been a lot of what my journey has been.
It's kind of like a children's version of Truman Show.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yep.
Oh, that's fascinating. Interesting. Hmm. Well, cool. So I'm curious, just one thing in that whole story you just told. What in the world led you to move to Fayetteville to start a
Yeah.
church?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you're
Um,
moving progressively, it seems like you'd go to
yeah. Yeah.
like a
So
blue state
this,
rather than a red state or something,
right.
you know?
Right. Yeah. There were three things that we wanted. We wanted to be someplace that was growing. And again, context, we were in central Michigan, very rural, very, um, just the economy was really bad. There were adults in our church who worked at fast food restaurants, and that was considered having a good job. So like that was kind of the situation we were coming from. So we wanted to be someplace growing. We wanted to be some place where the economy was good, and we wanted to be in a university town because we figured the type of thing we were doing would fit well in a university town.
Okay.
And it boiled down to Fayetteville and in Columbus, Ohio. And I really wanted to go to Columbus because I, grew up in Ohio and, Ohio State fan and, you know, close enough to watch Browns games. And that's, that's life, right?
Yeah.
Um, and but one of our team members who was gonna help us start the church already lived in Northwest Arkansas, and so it just made sense for one family to move instead of two families to move, and it worked out really well. We all of our friends were like, "You're moving to Arkansas,
Hmm.
really?" And what people don't realize is that Northwest Arkansas is one of the best kept secrets in the country. Um, Walmart headquarters is here, and because of that, um, so Walmart kind of requires any vendor that sells a product in a Walmart store. And so if you go into a Walmart store, any product, they they have it's kind of an unwritten rule, but it's a rule nonetheless. All of those companies have to have offices in Northwest Arkansas. And so it's a full-on crossroads of the world here in Northwest Arkansas. And it is really fantastic. We love it. The politics of the state notwithstanding, but we absolutely love living here.
Cool. I'm still a mountain biker, and it's really become like a destination mountain bike place.
Yes.
They've
Yeah.
invested a lot of money in trails and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and they're really really great trails in there.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
stuff. Well, cool. Well, are you still working with Vote Common Good?
I am the
Maybe
political director of,
share
Vote Common
that
Good.
little bit piece of the story. When did you start working with Vote Common Good?
Yeah.
You might
So
tell. I interviewed Doug on that, but
yeah.
just orient people. There'll be people listening who doesn't
Yeah.
know what Vote Common Good is.
Yeah. So if if you don't mind me kind of rewinding a little bit to how I ended up with the Vote Common Good. So Donald Trump got elected president in 2016, and I woke up the next day just kind of absolutely horrified. Horrified at what my tribes had done. I had grown up conservative Republican, and was a lifelong Republican. Um, had grown up in church, and look at Donald Trump being the nominee of the Republican Party and 81% of white evangelicals supporting him. It just was like my tribe, my tribes caused this, and so I just had this deep sense that I needed to do something, that I needed to like be involved in some way. Um, I came home, and I just kind of lived with this feeling for a couple of months. A lot of my friends were going to protests, joining groups, getting involved, getting plugged in different ways, which was great. But I just didn't have this sense of like what I was supposed to do. And I came home from work one day, and my wife had listened to a podcast about this organization that was recruiting people to run for Congress. It was a group called Brand New Congress. And I walked through the door from work, and she met me, and she held out her phone, and she said, "You've got to listen to this. You've got to do this." And so I was like, okay. So that night I, put the kids to bed and sat on the back porch with a cigar and listened to this podcast about this group. And I don't know, Fred, if you've ever had this experience where you get up and, have a normal day, go through all your normal stuff, and then you go to bed that night thinking, I might run for Congress. It's a bizarre day.
Not
It's a
had a day like
bizarre,
that.
it is a bizarre day, let me tell you. So as it turned out, I talked to a couple of friends about this. Um, Brand New Congress worked on this nomination like model where people would nominate someone that they think should run for office. And apparently some people nominated me, and I got a phone call, and it was, "Hey, this is Brand New Congress. Are you interested in running?" And so that led to me running a grassroots long shot campaign for Congress. The strategy of Brand New Congress, it was kind of a throw the bums out kind of movement. And the strategy was, what if in bright red districts we run Republicans, and in deep blue districts we run Democrats, but it's basically like a post-partisan kind of approach where we're going to put a team together of candidates across the party spectrum trying to win in their primaries. And so as it turned out, I was the only Republican on the slate. And I ran as a progressive Republican, primaried my congressman from the left in the Republican Party. And I learned to joke that, like, hey, do you know what it means to be a progressive Republican? It means nobody likes you. That's what that's what it means. So,
geez.
I obviously didn't win, but I learned a lot through the process, and politics was really my first love growing up. Well, the Cleveland Browns are my first love. Maybe politics my second love.
Dang.
And
You've had a tough life.
yeah. Oh, tell me about it. I tell people, I used to say, like, nobody knows what it feels like to be a Browns fan. With no idea. And I've decided that there is a fan base that knows how it feels to be a Browns fan, and that's Razorbacks, the Razorback fan base. Oh, it's just brutal. It's brutal. So yeah, and I get them both
Hey,
now.
the basketball, they had a good run this year in basketball, but
yeah, and then they were up 16 in the second half of the
then they
Sweet
blew it.
16 and lost in overtime
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, I'm a
so
Baylor grad, so
yeah, there you go.
we've only had one national championship in 50 years, so
Yeah, well, same with the Razorbacks. Um, so so I ran this long shot grassroots campaign, didn't win obviously, but learned a lot through the process and got really kind of passionate and interested in uh, uh, two things. One, like what it takes for regular people to run for office, um, and how to do that. And then the second thing is really how to engage religiously motivated voters um, in a way that is different from what the religious right has historically done. And so after my campaign, I got a call from Doug Paget, who I knew from the kind of emergent church days, and he was putting together a group of people to have this effort called Vote Common Good, which was inviting religious people to use the common good as their voting criteria instead of just voting for, hey, what's in it for me and my own self-interest. Maybe loving your neighbor is something that you ought to do in the voting booth too, and vote not just for yourself, but you vote for what's the common good, not just what's in it for me. Doing nothing out of selfish ambition, as the Apostle Paul might say. And so I came on board as the political director of Vote Common Good, which means that I kind of manage all of our relationships with candidates and campaigns. And we have traveled the country and do events with candidates. We do lots of different things, from trainings on Christian nationalism. Um, we do a lot of on the immigration issue. And then we also do kind of electoral work where we're trying to get Christian voters, particularly white evangelicals and white Catholics in particular, to think about voting differently than they have in the past. And so we have a Candidates for Common Good program that I put together and administrate. We do trainings for candidates to help them kind of understand how to talk to religious voters better. Um, and then we, travel the country and invite voters to engage differently. Um, we thought we were making a lot of progress, and since 2018, when we first kicked off, um, but quite frankly, the last election um, kind of knocked the wind out of us. It was, I described it as, you probably saw there was a commercial or an ad that went viral near the end of the campaign. It was woman walking into a voting booth with her husband, and he was kind of telling her how to vote, and she, votes differently than how her husband wanted her to. And it was voiced by Julia Roberts. It was our team that put that ad together.
Yeah, that one. And then didn't you do the George Clooney
Yeah, we had,
as
then
well?
we had a counterpart with George Clooney. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like we had, it's 2 days before the election. We're in Philadelphia. We've got the most viral ad of the entire campaign. It looks like, polls are coming in, like things are looking good. I mean, super heady times of like, wow, we've like, this is really amazing. And then, you wake up the day after election day, and it's just like, what did we just do?
I
There
mean,
was an emotion.
by 11 p.m. that night, at least Central Time, you were like,
Yeah,
"Holy crap!"
yeah,
What the
yeah,
hell?
yeah, yes. And it was there was an emotional whiplash that was really hard to come back from.
Mm.
And we all took a couple of months off and just, kind of licked our wounds. But now, we feel like we're back at it, and we've got important work to do, and we're not, the Donald Trump and his crew didn't, they didn't retreat when they lost. They kept they kept fighting, they kept organizing, they kept strategizing, and I feel like we've got to do the same.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I'm similar in that I came to Christ at 16, and that was 1977 for me. I was smoking weed, gave my life to Jesus. 2 months later, felt called to be a pastor, go off to Baylor and Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I voted for Reagan, and I was the pro-life Republican guy. But when Trump got on the I actually voted for Democrats along the way because I was probably a little more independent. I always wanted universal health care. I always thought about bigger issues than just, balancing the budget and fiscal conservative. Pro-life was something that, you know, I, I was always challenged with the on the ground reality of that issue. And I finally came to the point where I didn't let that control all my voting habits. But when the primary came around for 2016, I voted for John Kasich in the primaries,
Wow.
which seemed like the most
Yep.
reasonable Republican out there.
Yes, totally.
Um, but I was never for Donald Trump and always just befuddled by how Christians could even conceive of voting for a guy like this. I mean, it
Yeah.
just not, I want to love my enemies. I want to pray
Yeah.
for him and his family, but like, don't want him for president. I don't want
Yeah.
him as a role model for
Yeah. Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
really.
One of the things we say at Vote Common Good is we say, like, listen, we believe that everyone is the beloved child of God. Everyone is the light of the world and the salt of the earth. Donald Trump is the light of the world. But not every light of the world should be the president of the United States. And Donald Trump needs to take his dim little light back to Mar-a-Lago and leave the poor people of this country alone.
It's just a bizarre
Yeah.
nightmare. I mean, I think even, well, anyway, let's dive into your project now. Okay.
Sure.
Which
Sure.
what got my attention in terms of getting you on this podcast. All right. So yeah. So just a few weeks ago, or maybe a week or two ago, I don't know.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I see Robb's post about a book that he is selling that you can get on Amazon right now called The Gospel According to Donald Trump. So tell us about this project. First I laughed, then I was kind of halfway crying, like the reality of it was like, oh my God, this is,
Yeah.
it was funny. It was clever. But then at the same time, it's like, oh my God, this is so real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. All of that.
Yeah.
I was, it was probably about a month ago. This all came together very quickly. I was kind of thinking about the Jefferson Bible. You remember the Jefferson Bible, Thomas Jefferson,
Yeah, he cut
president?
out all the supernatural stuff
Yes.
basically and
Yeah.
left just the moral teachings of Jesus in there. Is
Yes.
that right? Okay.
Yes. So he literally cut and pasted a Bible together that took out all of the supernatural things that Jesus did, all the miracles. He didn't believe that Jesus was God, but he liked Jesus as a moral teacher. And so he put together this Bible that, kind of fit that approach. I was just thinking about this, and I just kind of had the random thought of, I wonder what a Bible would look like if Donald Trump did that. If Donald Trump took his ever-present Sharpie to to the Gospels.
That executive order Sharpie. Yeah.
Yes.
That seems to
Yeah,
correspond
the
to
one
Project 2025,
Yeah, it's the Sharpie that can take away human rights. It's the Sharpie that can alter the course of a hurricane. It's that Sharpie.
That Sharpie that can try to reorganize global geopolitics for
Exactly.
the last 80 years.
Yeah. If Donald Trump sat down with that Sharpie and kind of crossed out all the stuff he didn't like, what would it look like? Well, we live in a day and age where it's not terribly difficult to download a PDF of of the Gospels of Matthew, and I just started going through and redacting, blacking out all of the stuff that was inconsistent with the words, the attitudes, the actions of Donald Trump. And what it ended up being was all the faith goes away. because Donald Trump doesn't believe in anything other than himself. He's not someone who is dependent on something bigger or greater than himself. Uh, all the sin goes away. Donald Trump is very clearly said that he's never asked for forgiveness. He's got nothing to ask for forgiveness for. He doesn't do anything wrong. All of the women go away. All of the, with the exception of women kind of being in the background or providing, some type of service, like, Peter's mom, for instance, prepares a meal. The women go away because Donald Trump is threatened by autonomous, strong women. The love goes away. The love, compassion, kindness. So, I mean, we live in a world now where Donald Trump's supporters talk about how empathy is a sin. Like, and which is just insane to me. So
Yeah.
all of that goes away. And then all of the accountability goes away. And so any references to the Pharisees, to Pilate, to Caesar, to Herod, the political and religious leaders, like they get away with whatever they do. And so they all get redacted. And what so I started doing this, and it was amusing to me, and it was kind of cracking me up. And then as I worked through Matthew and then Mark and Luke and John, there was something that ended up emerging, which was really fascinating to me. The picture of Jesus that emerged when you took all of those things away, when you take away everything Jesus says about love and compassion, when you take away the calls to repentance and the kingdom, when you take away that call to belief and to faith, all of that goes away. The thing that's left is a Jesus who performs miracles and amasses followers. The thing that's left is power and fame. And I just kind of sat there, like, when I realized that this was the picture that was emerging, and I was like, that's exactly what Donald Trump is all about. Power and fame. Like, doing stuff to exercise power, getting people to follow you, and to have your brand on everything. And that, that's the gospel according to Donald Trump. It's power and fame.
For sure. Yeah. Wow. Let's chat about this a bit.
Yeah. So I mean, the funny thing is it like what's left is like, so we put together, so I've got a friend who does book design. And so I sent this around to some friends, and we talked about, like, well, should we, in the Gospels that the words of Jesus
It's
are
actually a
read.
book that you can actually buy now.
Yeah.
On
So
Amazon.
So we thought, like, should we make it, like the orange letters instead of red letters? We talked, like, throughout a whole bunch of different ideas. And I've got a friend who does book design, and he's like, I could put it together. And so we literally, like, put it
Put it up
together.
for those who are watching on YouTube.
And it's literally,
look at
like,
that.
it's,
Oh my gosh.
it's the New Testament, or it's the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, redacted. And it's
Wow.
it's
mostly gone.
It's shocking when you just flip through it. It is stunning. It's like, wow. And I've kind of thought of it a bit like a work of performance art to get people to
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
It's certainly satire, um, but there's some sense of like, oh, I never thought of it this way. And
Mm.
the visual gives you that like that way to anchor into this idea that like, yeah, there's something about Trumpism that is really, really inconsistent with Jesus.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
That and it just makes me laugh. I just
100%.
it
Yeah.
just
Oh,
has
it
cracked
is.
me up.
It's super clever, super clever. You know, I've tried to do, here's what's interesting. When I was at Baylor and Southwestern Seminary, it was before the conservative takeover.
Mm,
So, like, my professors at Baylor were largely
yeah.
liberal European theologians. They loved Tillich and Bultmann and all that. I was reading process theology, Rob,
Yeah.
at Baylor at 18. I was
Yeah.
reading Whitehead and Hartshorn, and I remember thinking, it's like God's evolving with everything else, kind
Yeah.
of idea.
Yeah. Uh,
But I didn't really, I gravitated toward kind of like the conservative thinkers, like today would be like an N.T. Wright, somebody like
right.
that. But and I still like N.T. Wright, but I'm more in the process camp now. But um, what what was interesting is when I was at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, I studied with a guy named William Estep, who was one of the top Anabaptist scholars in the world. I took all of his classes because I just totally dove into the Anabaptist theology. And for one of the things I realized is that today, Christians, people who call themselves Christians, and let's say the 81% of white evangelicals who voted for Trump, or the Catholics, on the Catholic side of that as well. I mean, there's a lot of Catholics, right,
Mhm.
that voted that way too.
And mainline Protestants too. Every major group, like, so if you divide white Christianity in America into evangelical, Catholic, mainline Protestant, the majority of all three groups of white Christians voted for Donald Trump.
Isn't that bizarre? Wow. That is
Yep.
just so
Even
bizarre
in
to
like
me.
mainline Protestants that we think of as liberal. Like,
Interesting.
yeah. So anyway, I interrupted you there.
Yeah, no, but I because I studied Reformation history with Dr. Estep, and
Mhm.
he wrote the Anabaptist history. He wrote a biography on Balthasar Hubmaier, who's one of the leading Anabaptist theologians. I studied the Renaissance and the Reformation through Estep through the lens of Anabaptists, and what I realized that Christians, I mean, like, think about it, even most Christians in America, people who call themselves Christians, probably have never taken a church history class.
Mm.
Have no, honestly, most of them are like biblically illiterate. I mean, I pastored a megachurch.
Yeah. Yes.
I know how
Yes.
shallow most
Yes.
people's understandings of the Bible is, because I
Yeah.
pastored thousands of them, right? And I'm not saying that. I just think it's most people don't read the Bible. Like, they
Right.
don't. They grow
Right.
up, if they grow up in a church, very few people have really read the Bible and ever thought about it in a deep, deep way. They're dependent upon, all different kinds. And most people are watching television morning, noon, and night. They get stuck into a propaganda trap like, Fox News or Newsmax. They don't listen to anything else.
Mhm.
So their whole worldview becomes, what's news fed to them through an echo chamber of ideas that support now Donald Trump, right? So they don't think about it from this larger Christian context, which I think is one of the things you're trying to do, is to like back people up a little bit and like go, hey guys, look, if you
Yeah.
call yourself a Christian, that
Yeah.
should have something to do with Jesus.
Yeah.
And let's just look at the reality of what this
Yeah.
looks like. And I think one of your performance art things is you're trying to wake people up to this
Yeah.
reality of like, this is the opposite of Jesus. It has nothing to do with Jesus,
Yeah. Yeah. And I often say that like our work at Vote Common Good, we're not trying to take America back for liberal Jesus. Like I don't want I like Donald Trump can do and advocate for whatever he wants. I mean, that I'm like, okay, fine. The problem I have is how he has talked about how he is going to save Christianity in America. He's bringing America back to God. And so many of the religious leaders who support him have spoken in such messianic terms about him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, listen, do your thing, make your case for why, we should have tariffs or why we should deport, millions of people. Like, make your case, but leave Jesus out of it. Like that, you know, because and so like if I have this sense of like I never would have brought Jesus into this discussion if you hadn't first.
Mm.
And you are using the Jesus that I know and love in such a way that is so, I mean, it's so offensive to me. It's so different from like the Jesus I know and love. And the Jesus who like so like captured my imagination as a 16-year-old kid when I became a follower of his. That for you to suggest that like your version of political engagement is what Jesus would want is just it's just offensive to me. And I say this not as someone like don't assume, oh, I'm uncritical of Democrats and think they're like, everything that Jesus would want. No, like
Yeah.
let's leave Jesus out of this altogether and have a conversation about how we organize ourselves as a group of people living in a shared land here. And and maybe that isn't about Jesus at all.
Yeah. Well, and the reason why I brought up the Anabaptist stuff is
Yeah.
because they were the only people in the whole Reformation that were separation of church and state people. So
Yeah.
like a lot of Americans don't understand that the magisterial Reformation of John Calvin, of Martin Luther, of the English reformers, of Zwingli in Switzerland, and of Germany, Luther in Germany, all that they were all union of church and state people
Yeah.
dating back to Constantine. And so
Yeah.
when the Catholic Church splintered and we had Church of England and Lutherans and Calvinists and Reformed Zwinglians and all these people, they all killed each other in the name of
Yes.
Jesus
Yes.
because they were union of church and state, and to
Yeah.
disbelieve the doctrines of the church was to commit treason against the state.
Yeah.
And therefore punishable by death if they wanted to kill you for not believing the right things.
Yeah.
The Anabaptists were the only ones that took the teachings of Jesus seriously about loving your neighbor and loving your enemy. And they said that you shouldn't unite church and state.
Yeah.
And it was that stream of Christians that actually fed this establishment of the U.S. Constitution as a liberal democracy. Why did all these Christians in America who are coming to America agree to a liberal democracy with a separation of church and state? It was because of the backdrop of all the killing of Christians killing Christians in the Reformation.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
don't get that.
Right.
So
Right.
why is there an important thing about following Jesus and actually thinking about separation of church and state, which is kind of that's kind of what you're saying right now,
Yeah.
if I'm
Totally.
hearing you correctly, is
Yep.
let's run a democracy where all people can thrive and be equal and have equal opportunity, and of the
Yeah.
people, a government of the people, for the people, by the.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yeah.
pardon me, but
No,
I'm
totally.
but
Totally.
if I'm hearing
Yeah.
you right, I
And
think it's that piece of Christianity, and granted,
yeah.
most of the Christian world have been Christian imperialists, Christian nationalists who have
Yes.
killed everybody else that doesn't believe with them or agree with them. But
Yeah.
is that what we want in America? Do we want to return to that?
Yeah.
I'm
So
like, holy
one
crap.
of the things that we talk about when we talk about Christian nationalism in our trainings at Folk Common Good is we talk about how trying to wrestle with or argue about or come to some understanding about the relationship between church and state is as American as apple pie. Like it goes all the way back. Like when the colonies were being formed, many of the colonies were specifically religious colonies
Right.
that you to live and to have full rights within those colonies, you had to be a part of a particular religion. Pennsylvania is formed this way. South Carolina is formed this way.
Pennsylvania was Quaker. Georgia
Yes.
was Church of England.
Yeah,
Massachusetts
exactly.
Catholic. I
Yep.
mean,
And then it was a Baptist pastor named Roger Williams who formed who said, no, we've got to do this a different way.
Thank you.
And he founded the state of Rhode Island, which was the first state where there was actual religious freedom
Yes.
and separation of church and state. And then as the revolution happens, the Constitution gets written, all of this same debate is happening. And in the Civil War, that all of this same debate is happening. In the Civil Rights Movement, all of the same debate is happening. And now all of this same debate is happening. We have constantly had to, this is not an argument that is kind of done for all ages. It is every American generation has to struggle with and wrestle with what's going to be the relationship between church and state in our lifetime. And we, and frankly, we have those of us who believe that, separation of church and state is the way to go because Christian nationalism is bad for Christianity and it's bad for the nation. Yes. It's not, it hurts both.
Right.
And meanwhile, we've got elected officials like, Lauren Boebert, the congresswoman from Colorado, who says, we've got to stop talking about this stupid separation of church and state thing. It's just something that was written in a dang letter. It's not in the Constitution, and has a completely different approach. And, so there's so much work to be done and ongoing, and, trying to, in the midst of that discussion, in the midst of that debate, when one side says, yes, it's church and state wrapped up together, and oh, by the way, we've got the version of the church that's going to run everything. That's when I say, whoa, wait a minute. We've got to question both. Do you have the version of the church that we want to go with? And church and state shouldn't be all wrapped up together anyways.
Yes. So I'm man, so important. So I think it's important for Christians to understand that Project 2025 is, you call it, it is a project to install a certain version of Christianity as the state religion, basically. Yeah. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what they're trying to do, and mandate that through executive orders for the whole country, and break down and destroy the separation of powers that are in the Constitution, because they can't get there democratically. So now we're going to destroy the Constitution, the separation of powers, and get one chief executive to execute through his Sharpie pen, as you've just done, all of these things that are really intended to build a, quote, Christian state.
Yes.
And eliminate a secular state. Now, here's the crazy thing. Two organizations that have supported this Project 2025, and this is, but Opus Dei, the Catholic side, and New Apostolic Reformation, the Protestant side, or the evangelical side. I actually studied with Peter Wagner at Fuller Theological Seminary.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew Peter well. I hung out with him, John Wimber, the Vineyard Movement.
Yep.
I, what's crazy is, Peter even, I mean, I don't think he would have wanted to see the New Apostolic Reformation go the way that it has and turn into this
Right.
Christian nationalism
Yep.
thing. And like, he was more about winning people to Jesus, not
Yeah.
about eliminating a secular state in America. But that's what
Yes.
his movement has turned
Yep.
into.
Yes. Yeah. The
So
whole
crazy.
seven mountains idea that there's seven in it, seven areas of influence within a culture. Um, and let me see if I can name them. It's politics or government, business, entertainment, education, family, and I don't know, a couple others. I can't remember. Media and there's another one too. Um, and the theory is that if you can if you can have control of those seven areas of influence in a culture, like that's the way to people's hearts and minds. And and Wagner and Wimber were like yeah, yes, like let's do that so that we can win people's hearts and minds to Jesus. And what has happened with the new apostolic reformation and the way the seven mountains theory plays out today is yes, let's do that so we can have control of these cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's a and it's happening not just in the United States, it's happening around the world.
Yeah.
It is not, and sometimes you hear Christian nationalism referred to as white Christian nationalism. Um, and white Christian nationalism is a thing, but Christian nationalism is not exclusive to white people.
Right.
It is growing rapidly in Hispanic churches.
Yeah.
You can see, and I mean, the new apostolic movement, charismatic movement, like go together, the Pentecostalism, like it's one of the biggest growing movements within
Yeah.
Hispanic churches. Um, and there's also versions of Christian nationalism in black churches as well. So it's not exclusively a racial thing.
Yeah.
It's not a There's some people that think that Christian nationalism is simply a veneer for racism. It's not what it is. It's something different than that, and it plays out differently. But it's absolutely a hijacking of Christian symbols, stories, imagery, and even ideas like, like the seven mountains were developed. That theory was developed as a part of like evangelism,
Yes.
and it's been co-opted and hijacked like so many other things have been to, be a support for a political ideology.
Yeah. And I get probably this Palm Sunday, this coming Sunday, where this will come out after Palm Sunday and Easter, though, by the way, Rob. But I'm going to do, the Pilate's army that marches into Jerusalem with
Mhm.
on the horses with all the power symbolism.
Yeah.
And then Jesus's mock ceremony
Yeah.
on a donkey with no power.
Yeah.
The clash of the empire with
Yeah.
the down and outers,
Yeah.
the marginalized,
Yeah.
the weak. This is my message this Sunday.
Love it. Love it.
And my point is, and I'm going to bring out this the Reformation stuff, but my point is that from when the church and state have been in union throughout church history since Constantine, it is almost the worst version
Yes.
of Christianity and the opposite of Jesus, like since its
Yeah.
inception, since Augustine
Yes.
till now.
Yes.
You want a version of Christianity that's the opposite of Jesus, then look to these forms of Christian imperialism, Christian dictatorship, Christian nationalism. And
Yes.
I thought David Gushie's book, on defending democracy from its Christian enemies,
Yeah.
because he has chapters on Brazil, on Hungary, on all of these countries that out there that are trying to
Yeah.
use Christianity as a way
Oh,
to import fascism,
yes.
dictatorships, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And on the scale of democracies, you know, there's some democracies are better than others, right? And
Mhm.
we're slipping into a kind of democracy that isn't very democratic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I for a long time resisted calling, Trumpism a cult. I just didn't like that terminology. Um, and I, came to realize that it actually is a really apt description and a really good metaphor. And the same thing with fascism. Especially during the first one, I just felt like, I don't know, this just doesn't feel like, it felt like hyperbole. It felt like, the boy who cried wolf to me of like, but I'm at a point now where I really think that, we are in a spot where there are real challenges to democratic norms in the United States that that if things go the wrong way, we very well could lose them.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think about like think about the title of the book that you had asked me. I think in a maybe in an off air version, you'd asked me about a book I'd read recently, and I recently read a book about some kind of regular folks who were members of the Nazi Party in Germany, and the title of the book is "They Thought They Were Free," and like I, I think I could see something very similar happening here, where there is a mass delusion about the reality that we're living in when it's very different than what we think.
Mm, 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 mm. Yeah. So, I mean, and there are some Republicans out there that are raising their voices. I mean, they're marginalized voices now, but they
Yeah.
are there. And I think we just need more of those to,
Yeah.
I think that's going to be important as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Your Kretzingers and, you know, people
Yeah.
that are,
Yeah. Boy, it feels to me like that ship has sailed. That like if
oh,
you know, uh I mean it's deeply I have entertained just in my mind, I've entertained the idea like, oh, Elon Musk must have stolen the election somehow. There's something with Starlink and the ballots. They must have, because the alternative is the majority of voting Americans want more of this. And I like, there's part of me that would rather believe in a conspiracy theory than believe that,
yeah,
that my neighbors would want this.
yeah,
And, oh,
yeah.
having to come to grips with that. And then the challenge of like, okay, how do I love someone who's in a different political place than me? So, it had been a while since I've gotten a comment like this, but so Doug Paget and I do a podcast for Vote Common Good. And and so during our podcast today, somebody commented, and this was the comment that we got. I cut and pasted it because I wanted to save it because it had been a while since I had gotten something like this. Says you all call yourselves Christians while defending the most deeply rooted paediocratic network on earth. You stand behind satanic gender propaganda, mutilating children, corrupting innocents, and mocking God's creation, and dare to act morally superior. On God, every single one of you defending this demonic agenda will burn in hell. You're not Christians, you're wolves in sheep's clothing, and judgment is coming.
Yo.
It had been a while since like I had been condemned to hell. I mean,
Damn.
it's not the first time, but
Like
it had
that's an
been a bit.
appropriate damn.
Yeah. But how do
Oh my
I
gosh.
how do I engage spiritedly and passionately in the political debate and the political realm that's happening right now in our country, where there's so much at stake and it's so tremendously important. How do I do that without turning my enemy into a monster, turning myself into a monster?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Um, and how do I make sure that I don't have some kind of like, liberal Christian or progressive Christian response that mirrors this
Yeah.
this comment that I got
Yes.
about the people I disagree with. Now, like the disagreements are tremendously important. They're absolutely critical. This is not a like, oh, can't we all just get along kind of thing. No, there are lives at stake for trans kids,
Yeah.
immigrants, so many folks
Yeah.
whose lives are at stake.
Yeah.
And how do I defend their lives while not losing my own or dehumanizing the people who are doing the dehumanizing of others? It's so hard.
It is.
So
And,
hard.
that's where we go back to Gandhi and MLK and, Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
I mean, golly, what they walked through.
Yeah.
And how they handled it and how they continued to advocate for nonviolence and love and yet stand against injustice. Those practices are so challenging, so important, and not easy. Not easy.
No, not at all.
Well, thank you for being on the podcast, Robb.
My pleasure.
Thank
Fred.
you for your creativity and your performance art.
Yeah, thank you. If folks want to find the book,
Yeah.
they can go to thegospelaccordingtodonaldtrump.com. It's thegospelaccordingtodonaldtrump.com. There's links there to Amazon. If you're not an Amazon person, there's a link to Ingram Spark where you can get the book. There's a link there to Instagram account where I will oftentimes, in response to the news of the day, post a redacted verse of the Bible, and some AI Jesus stuff that makes me laugh, and Jesus doing bizarre things like invading Canada, or arguing that like Jesus like suggesting that we should go into all the world and annex Greenland, things like that, just the crazy stuff that comes to mind. And I've put together some what I think are absolutely hilarious AI videos to promote the book. One is I took the image of Donald Trump holding the Bible the wrong way in front of the church in Washington, D.C.
Right.
and animated it and had him talk about the gospel according to Donald Trump and why it's the greatest Bible ever written. And got
I saw one of those. I showed Sam, my podcast producer, one of those videos that he did. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I've got one where it's kind of a pastor of a megachurch doing a scripture reading, and as he goes to read the Sermon on the Mount, Donald Trump bleeps it all out, and he can't get through it as a result of that. So I'm working on a Sharpie one right now as well, and all the terrible things that Donald Trump has done with his Sharpie. So if you want to follow the fun, you can do that. Go to thegospelaccordingtodonaldtrump.com and you can find everything there.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks you, Fred.
Thanks for your creativity, and I appreciate it. Yes. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. And if you have a comment like the one that Robb just read us, don't put it on my Facebook account. I'm just kidding. All right, man. Thanks. Appreciate it. Tell your wife I said hi too. And
I will.
I know she's doing some great. She's a great artist, by the way.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. I've been impressed with her work. So anyway, great to see you again. Take care and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Fred.
Thanks everybody for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures, and we'll see you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.